We are back. Episode number 100. Well, we've done more than 100, but we'll just consider this as the hundredth one. It's
Yeah.
a long, little fun journey. So we need to get to 1,000. How many years that's going to take?
Well, hopefully we're doing it for that long.
So this week's topic is following up from everything we've talked before, and I would like to dig it deeper into the mastering the environment for health and fitness. And uh, more often than not, we keep you keep opening up about like light and where you live and what's surrounding you and all those kind of things. Uh, I would like to go and dig deep into, firstly, in my personal opinion, the most important part, internal environment.
Yes.
What are your thoughts on that and how important it is for everything else we put in place before you actually gonna get fit and healthy physically? How important it is to mentally get yourself into zone, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. So, number one, that's probably going to be your mental state, your internal mental state and hormonal state, which seems obvious at first. This is going to really run the show as far as like how far do you get with whatever goal that you're trying to set. But something that we were talking about before we started was the mental capabilities of doing the hard thing is it's a skill. It's a skill that's built up through repetitiveness, number one. So just doing little things that are not necessarily enjoyable, or things that you personally don't necessarily enjoy. Um, and things that are perceived as difficult in the moment but really aren't, are very low key wins for mental state and mental drive and creating neurotransmitters correctly and things of that nature. It's very similar to what we talked about enzymes, right? It's not about doing the hardest thing. It's about doing the thing that kicks off the process of making enzymes, but is very low hanging fruit. Um, Again, I know that, I kind of sound like a broken record, but cold exposure, right? Proper cold, and even sun exposure, right? Like when you go to the equator, your first few days there, it does not feel good to go out in the middle of the sun, right? Like you're like, holy crap, this is hot. This is really hot. I'm kind of uncomfortable right now. Just like when you go out in the cold for 10 or 15 minutes, this sucks. This doesn't really, I don't enjoy this. It kind of sucks. But at the end of the day, right, it's 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Sometimes 30 minutes if you can stand that, but it didn't kill you. It didn't do anything necessarily harmful to you, but it wasn't comfortable, right? And coincidentally, both of those things, strong sunlight or strong cold for short periods of time, do a couple things. They turn on a region in the brain that is essentially the fight region of the brain. So there's a difference between stress and stress you impose upon yourself. There is a internal mental difference, right? Because if I just attack you in any way, shape, or form, whether it's physical or mental or verbal, right? That's not something that you were prepared for. It's not something that you wanted to deal with. Your reaction to that will be defensive, right? So right away, the reaction internally, hormonally, and mentally is a completely different reaction than say, hey, I'm going to challenge myself and you pick whatever challenge, right? It doesn't really matter the challenge, but the fact that you chose it now sets up for a dopamine reward system. There's a reward there, right? When I attack you or anybody or anything attacks you from outside and you're not prepared for it, there is no reward. The reward is I don't want to deal with this, right? So that is a crucial component in figuring out what to do next, right? Like how are you going to approach the specific attack? Are you being attacked? Are you allowing this in, or are you seeking out that discomfort, whatever it might be, getting in shape, losing body fat, a performance or a mental type of thing? If you're choosing it, the outcome is already going to be different because the hormones are going to respond differently. The neurotransmitters are going to respond differently. So choosing to go outside in the cold for 10 or 15 minutes immediately starts to put you in a reward dopamine tract center, meaning you're going to make dopamine for better pleasure sensing capabilities and opportunity sensing capabilities later for that whole day, essentially, right? So starting your day with something like that. Now, we can, do you have, you can leverage this without having cold outside. You could leverage this during the middle of the summer if you have a cold plunge, for example. That's one way to control your environment. Let's define that for a minute, right? Controlling your environment means you control the type of light that's in it, the temperature that's in it, and the obvious things like your air quality, right? If you have a filtration system, we're talking about indoor environments currently, right? Like you don't really have control of what's going on outside. We're talking about indoor environments that humans have control of, right? Most people don't think twice about that. Like they're like, oh, I have some lights on and the temperature sit at 68 degrees Fahrenheit. But being able to control it, right? You have control of those items. Now you can start inducing willingness of being slightly discomfort sometimes. Like, for example, my home that I'm building has a gym attached to it and everything. I'm going to be able to control the temperature in that gym independent of the rest of the house on purpose. Why? Because at certain times, I want to challenge myself and train in a cold environment or train in a hot environment, depending on what I'm trying to induce. I'm controlling the temperature and I'm controlling the light environment within that. The lights that I might have in there, some UV lamps and some infrared lamps. You can go with expensive ones like EMR Tech and things of that nature that are much more targeted, but you can go with broad spectrum stuff like incandescent light bulbs or halogen light bulbs. They put off UV and infrared all together. So those are ways that you can control your environment for certain outcomes. Like for example, this has come up, with some people here and there when I do consultations. They live in the northern hemisphere, and we talk about cold in the winter months at this time of the year, right? How that's needed to be able to process food correctly and not get digestive problems. That also means that they have to limit carbohydrates at that time of the year and stuff like that. And the question comes up, well, is there anything I can take or do that allows me to function like it's summertime? And the answer to that is yes, right? What are you missing, right? Let's fundamentally talk about the environment that you're missing. You're missing infrared light because the sun is not as strong and the days are not as long, right? And they're like, okay, what can I do about that? I'm like, well, you can get creative. You can do a lot of things. You can use infrared panels. Those are easy to install everywhere. I'm like, if you have a little bit more money and maybe a nice facility that you can do this in, you can install infrared geothermal heat in your flooring. So now you're getting passive infrared from just like Scandinavians do. Like a lot of Scandinavian countries have this already built into their homes and that's what keeps them metabolically thriving through winter months because they have really long winters, sometimes 9 months of winter. And so passive infrared heat through geothermal, and it doesn't have to be like natural geothermal. You can just heat water, literally. That's what I'm doing in my house. So now you're giving yourself a lot of infrared light passively without the sun. And then you add in a little bit of UV light from a UV panel or a combination red and UV light like EMR Tech. So now you've taken care of temperature control and you've taken care of light control. Those are the biggest ones. That's why I started with those. Those are the biggest ones in terms of environment that you want to know how to manipulate a little bit, right? And basically it's, with temperature, it's cold or it's hot, right? Like that's really what you want to do. Being in the middle, 60, 70 degrees Fahrenheit, the comfort zone, that does nothing for physiology. That doesn't do anything for neurotransmitter action, for thyroid manipulation. When you get cold, you're going to elicit internal systems to turn on for heat production and neurotransmitter production. When you get hot, that's a ATP production and stimulation effect. Essentially, think of yourself kind of like a lizard, which is as you get hotter, you're going to be more active. You're going to be able to put out more energy, et cetera, all those types of things. And any athlete knows that. That's why the concept of warming up comes from, right? Hey, once you're warmed up and your body's hot, you're ready to really do a lot of action. You can do that passively by just controlling your temperature in your environment. When you get cold, coincidentally, it's going to have kind of the same reaction over time of like heating your own body up with its own body temperature, but it does it through different mechanisms, which are valuable for mental capabilities of getting your mind right of, hey, I did something slightly uncomfortable. I got exposed to some cold. I survived it just fine. That gives you a reward immediately as soon as you get done with the cold exposure. So that's what I'm saying. Like when people are putting together goals of any kind, whether it's physical, mental, those goals, the reward for those are technically not going to happen for like months later. Sometimes a lot of months later, right? Depending on what that goal is. But if you can give yourself rewards as you go, sometimes daily, that is a very powerful feedback mechanism to keep you rolling, to keep you moving in the direction that you want. And so doing leveraging your environment to consistently give you these small rewards that you don't even think about. You're not even really going to think about it, but you will feel them. You will feel really good about your execution on a more short time frame. Because face it, it takes special people to grind for months on end with no reward. Like that's not most people. Most people need some level of reward at least weekly at some point, right? Especially when you've been doing it for a long time. And that's where some of these, I would say hacks are really beneficial. Another thing that is, so those are kind of like setting you up for success type of environmental changes. Do you have any
There's
questions?
a,
So
there's a thing that I believe it was Milos Sarcev who mentioned about why Eastern European bodybuilders are so successful because they've used to suffer it. They
yeah,
literally in Iran they wake up and bust their ass until they are grown ups, and even then they still go and wake up and milk a goat or whatever. So dieting for them is a pleasure, and
yeah,
what you just said, it sounds like having the clarity of outcome is the most important thing for improving your health. Because more often than not, we see now detox this, detox that, or if it fits your macros and whatnot. And there is no clear outcome on what's it gonna achieve. You're gonna lose weight, and there is no emotion to attach to it. I can lose weight by just not drinking water for a day. I can guarantee you I'll be 5 kilos lighter next day. Just that's how much
yeah,
work.
yeah.
So following up on that, how can you in add environmental changes? You already kind of started to touch up on that. That can enhance your mood in a way that can you even enhance your mood in a way that you want to do these things that you otherwise would not want to? You know that working out, eating healthy, or doing all these things is good for you.
Mhm.
But so many people still don't want to do it because their life is so goddamn comfortable and they know they can get immediate pleasure with a click of the button by just ordering something online or watching some movie or whatnot. Is there any
Yeah.
kind of environmental changes that people can do to, let's say, make them more prone to getting involved in these activities that in long term is going to give them a lot of benefit?
Yeah. So number one, it depends on what spectrum you're on, right? So let me clear that up, right? Um, there's two reasons why you might not be. We'll use the word motivated, but that's probably not the right word. But we'll use that because it's what people will understand, right? So there's, in my opinion, there are two main reasons why you're not going to be motivated to do the things that you need to do to accomplish the thing. One, you have too much anxiety going on, meaning, just like you said, there isn't a clear enough outcome for you that you're just jumping from idea to idea or protocol to protocol. And you kind of know what you're seeking, but there is no clarity and you're just kind of pulled everywhere, right? The second variation to that is you're paralyzed, meaning you don't actually, you know what you want, right? You know what you need to do, but you're not actually able to physically or mentally execute on anything. You just revert to, oh, that's just too hard, right? So those are the two kind of places that people get stuck, right? So depending on where you're at there, let's start with the first one, which is you're doing things, but it just scattered everywhere, right? Like so you basically are just spinning your wheels type of scenario, right? In that particular case, I would say that the most important thing would be some level of mind, body, and I would say almost like soul type of connection of like unifying all of your needs. And the best type of environmental hack to like give you that level of clarity would be sound, like a sound room, like sound with actual water in them, right? Things where you can sit and block out everything, right? Essentially a meditation room, right? So a room that's kind of quiet, that you have maybe some UV light in there, maybe a water feature. It doesn't have to be complicated, like something that you can put on your wall that's literally falling water. And that's important because that has a Lennard effect. A Lennard effect actually stimulates the brain to relax. That's why water sounds are very relaxing, is because we have I mean, we're made of water, literally. We're made of anywhere from, depending on your age, anywhere from 50% to 80% of water. So water actually stimulates other water molecules to be more coherent. So you want to have some kind of a water feature in there, and you want to have it somewhat quiet. And then I would say definitely some infrared light, whether that's passive infrared, like you're heating the floor with infrared, or an infrared light panel, and a little bit of UV light. Nothing too aggressive as far as lighting. Just kind of like what I have going on in the background. You want something pretty kind of dim, but you're getting those two types of light going on. Some water sounds, and then any deep bass sound like the of meditating and like those types of sounds. Just literally for like 10 minutes, 10-15 minutes, once, twice a day. You either do some journaling in there, or you have some kind of a plan that you put together for your day. Those types of environments are very helpful for the people that are very sporadic, right? Because they probably already have great ideas. They probably already executing on some things that are good for them. But then there's a whole bunch of other crap that's like kind of holding them back,
Would you go as
right?
far as and suggest a specific frequency sound in those rooms, like
Mhm.
432 or whatever, because we know
Yeah.
different frequencies have different effects in your body.
Yeah. 40 hertz is really good. Another one is the alpha wave, which is 7.83 hertz. You can use binaural beats, those types of meditation. Like if you're more of a like that's probably something that I would do. I'm not much of a uh, journaler or meditator, but I can put on something like that and I can easily melt for like, 10 or 15 minutes of just relax, get my mind right, don't think about anything. And then when you get done, you're like, oh, everything seems clear. I don't need to do that. I don't need to do this. This is the one, two, three, or four things that I do need to do, right? And it gives you better focus and clarity. I find that very, very, very valuable, especially for people that like entrepreneurs and people that have a lot of things going on, right? And then on top of that, they're trying to get fit or have other, personal goals. So the only way you can attack all of those types of things is by setting clear objectives for each section, if you call it. And you're not going to be able to do that while you're in the throe of dealing with everything. So you need some time and an environment that amplifies your ability to focus, amplifies your ability to zone in on exactly what you need to do. And most of that's going to be, for example, if you had enough money, you could make this thing like a super duper uh, kind of like going to the Himalayas type of event, right? Everybody, not everybody, but people say, hey, when you go to the Himalayas, it's just a different feeling. You're feeling more comfortable, you're feeling more relaxed, you're almost permanently in a meditative state. There's a reason for that, right? You're getting if you spend enough time there, you're going to get upregulation of oxygen intake, right? Because red blood cell count is going to go up because of the elevation. Because of the elevation, you're getting a lot more UV light and you're getting cold exposure at the same time. So it's amplifying all of these effects and you're getting melanated at the same time. You can recreate that to I would say probably 70 to 80% of what you're going to experience by doing that in your own environment, right? You maybe employ an oxygen chamber in there. If it's a small enough room, you could do the whole thing with oxygen chamber. Like I know that the Soviet Union has training facilities for athletes where they pump up the oxygen in there, right? They literally bring up the oxygen content just like an oxygen chamber, but it's for the whole training facility. You can do that in your own room, right? Like if you have the money, you can set up a room that has extra oxygen in it, extra UV light, extra infrared light, and you add some water features and some relaxation features. You go in there and zone out for 10 or 15 minutes. You probably would feel like you took a nap for an hour and you wake up nice and, you're not actually waking up in those 10 minutes. But when you get done with that therapy, it would feel like waking up from a nap. You'd have a lot more mental clarity. And uh, you could even bump that up a bit by following that session up. Like say you're like, hey, I need 15 to 20 minutes to get a hold of myself, really execute on, write down everything that I needed to write down. You go in that room, you do that. Immediately when you come out, you want to execute. How do you execute? A little bit of cold exposure gets the dopamine train running and the epinephrine and adrenaline train running for physical activities if that's what you need to do next or whatever. And so it doesn't have to be a cold tub. You could literally leave that room or while you're in that room, do some manual manipulation of your vagus nerve with cold therapy. This is as simple as it needs to get. You literally take an ice cold drink with ice in it and you give yourself a brain freeze. You just hold the water at the back of your mouth and freeze the carotid artery that's going to your brain, and you're cooling off the brain immediately. You're going to induce a big dopamine punch at that point, especially if you follow that, if that's followed by that relaxation, a pseudo recovery session that you did for 10 or 15 minutes before that. That's a really, I mean, that whole thing can be executed in 30 minutes, right? In 30 minutes, you can completely elevate your game mentally and physically if you're that type of person, right? The anxious, lots of things going on, that type of scenario.
And it's something you already touched up before that I think needs to be repeated all the time. Cold exposure doesn't mean ice bath. You can literally dunk your face in a cold water and kickstart the process.
Yeah, or like I just said, hey, get a cold drink, sip it down slowly, and you're intentionally wanting to give yourself a brain freeze. You could even do it with a lot. My favorite and easy one to use is a cold spoon. I keep a couple spoons in my freezer. You pull them out and you massage your eyeballs with the cold spoon. That's literally cooling the whole tract of your eye and back into the brainstem so that you essentially experience a mini brain freeze that amplifies neural circuitry in the brain, closes up mitochondrial membrane or mitochondrial transport chain. So your neurons are firing at a faster rate because the circuit is now shorter temporarily for some time. Uh, and so, yeah, cold exposure does not have to be a cold plunge, right? It is depending on what you're wanting to do, right? If this is all mental, right? Mental and and the will to do the things, and that's all you're really lacking, then you don't need a whole body cold exposure. You just need to cool the blood going to the brain, essentially.
You mentioned hyperbaric oxygen chamber. Is there anything else that people can do to improve the quality of the air they're breathing? Because more often than not, majority of people I work with say will be in office and they don't even realize how much time they spend indoors until you physically ask them to write it down. So
Yeah,
they sit in an office. I'm surrounded by windows. Like I got like 12 windows in here. And
yeah,
I'm not exposed to sun. I'm exposed to
correct.
light, but I'm not exposed to sun, and people don't understand the difference. And at the same time, I'm inside. So the air I am breathing now will not be as good as I'm going outside. Lucky for
Yeah.
me, I'm next to park. Every 45 minutes or so, I can just go out for 5 minutes or so, get my dose of fresh air and come back. So is there anything that people can do at home, in office, in their gyms to improve the quality of air? And do they need to do that? Maybe they need to reduce quality of air.
Well, so no, this is a good point, right? So this is where more modern homes that are being net zero built. What does that mean? That means that they have very, very, very tight homes, meaning they don't turn over air to the outside very much. What that does is it makes them more energy efficient, right? Net zero homes means very energy efficient. How do you make it very energy efficient? You don't let any of the air inside the home go outside unless it's controlled, right? Meaning it's going through some kind of a filtration system and back and forth. That also leads for um, static air in the home, and that can accumulate toxins of any kind, right? Because the carpet that you're standing on is letting off some toxin. The paint that you used, all of these are going to let off some level of toxin. You want that to leave the home or at least be filtered. So a HEPA filter, right, just a portable one, is a good one. Any of them that's HEPA rated will work. But I happen to live with, my wife is very sensitive to dust, very, very sensitive to dust, which is, again, another reason why I built the home the way that I built it, because I live somewhere where I have 6 months of winter. I didn't want forced air heating running dust through all my ducts and every single year having dust accumulation and having to pay for the ducts. So that's a second reason why I went with in-floor heat, radiant heat, because then you're not dependent on airflow to heat the house for 6 months out of the year. It's just radiating up and there's significantly less dust because there's just not being moved around. But that's not something that we have previously had. So the things that I found is portable HEPA filters. They're like $200 or $300 US. That's not very expensive for you can get really expensive ones like $1,000. I don't find that they perform any better because at the end of the day, you're going to have to change the filters in them regularly. And that's when you really start to notice the improvements in your health because when you change the filters, you will see the toxins and the dust and everything that is in your home that you would normally be breathing. So a good quality HEPA filter inside, especially if you're somebody who spends, like, you have an indoor office, right? In-home office, and you work from home, or maybe you go to an office building, right? But you're in your own little cubicle and whatever, and you're stuck there for 8 hours a day. Bring yourself a little portable, HEPA filter, right? Something that's, I don't know, probably the size a little bit bigger than a laptop. That's big enough for a small space like that. $200. You'll notice that the air quality that you're breathing was probably not as good as you thought. And that's just kind of normal for being indoors all the time. It really is. So that's a big one. Um, Reducing environment. So that's part of the reducing environmental toxins. And that also frees up your immune system, right? Because you're not having to deal with as many onslaughts of your immune system trying to figure out, oh, is this foreign or is this internal, and we don't need to take care of it. So that when you do get exposed to some kind of a cold or some kind of virus, your body's not already in a depleted state, right? From having to fight off other things all the time, like dust and mold and things of that nature. So that's what I would say is probably third on the scale of things that you want to take into account in your environment. Number one is light. Number two is temperature. Number three would be the actual air quality that you're in, right? Most people just assume that it's good, and that's a bad assumption, right? That's just not really a good assumption. Just because you can't see it, just because you can't feel it, doesn't mean that it's not acting upon you. And a HEPA filter is a great way to just see that. You'll literally see it the first time you change the filter.
Following up on that, I'm interested into do you see that because of this, hey, you only need 15 minutes of working out a day, 25 minutes, 45, whatever, that people are starting to have a lot of joint and mobility and strain issues because they are literally taking it. I only need to move 15 minutes a day and that's it.
Mhm.
So I just came back from Holland. Well, just I was in a summer, like a training camp in Holland, and I was eating every 90 minutes and I was walking every 40 minutes for 10, 15, 20 minutes. So I was moving all the time and I had the best results ever. People would say, oh, you can't gain muscle if you expended so much energy. But like, I wasn't expending energy. I was making sure I have more energy by moving more. Just
Yeah, yeah. Well, and that's not a foreign concept, right? Like, um, a lot of people, again, people that are listening to us, this won't sound too foreign, and that's this: your cells, all of them, from just above the skin all the way into the middle of your body, they are all storing energy in all different forms. It can be light energy, it can be electrical energy, and it can be vibrational energy. Meaning, as you move, your body has developed ways to, because your energy expenditure to move, that can be recaptured with other tissues in your body, like the tendons and ligaments capturing energy. Like, that's actually not a foreign concept in sports physiology of like the Golgi tendons storing energy for the in the eccentric phase for the concentric phase. That's a known thing, right? But this goes even to the very small molecular level. Just moving stores energy in the body, especially for like passive muscles like your intestines and your digestion tract and things of that nature. So yes, you're 100% right. You might only need to physically work out, right? Whatever that means for you for like 25 minutes. That does not mean that you don't need to move. And that also, specifically, addressing what you said as far as like joint integrity and things of that nature, your joints are dependent on infrared and UV light to regenerate, right? So think of this scenario. You wake up at 5 a.m., you go work out, you train pretty hard for 30 minutes, you go back to your office or back to your home, and you never go outside until later in the afternoon when you get done working, right? What did you do there? You induced some level of damage in your training event, but you didn't actually facilitate or augment or, how would I say, made the recovery process efficient, right? You essentially dampened it. You made it inefficient by not getting any level of outside exposure. That would be passive energy accumulation. Infrared energy is going to give your mitochondria the capability to produce more ATP, aka more energy for the recovery process. UV light is going to be stored in melanin sheets in all of your body, aka to be able to produce its own internal light for signaling and recovery processes. If you devoid that and you didn't move, right, you didn't store any vibrational energy, you've essentially ended up with a depletion event, a damaging event with no recovery after. If you repeat that regularly enough, your joints and tendons and ligaments will not feel good and potentially will rupture.
And we've seen and tried and tested it and as well. Like I've extensively tested it on myself. If I don't walk after training, it doesn't necessarily need to be like cardiovascular work. It just needs to be 20 minutes outside. Then my joints will be sore. If I do
Mhm.
that, then I recover really quick.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're saying that 20 minutes for you is enough. There's a couple caveats there. You're a much bigger person than most people, right? That means you are a bigger solar panel. You literally have more surface area to collect energy and produce energy, right? So 20 minutes for you, probably totally fine, right? For somebody else, that might be more like 30 minutes. It
Yeah,
also will
20
depend on.
minutes every single day for 20 years.
Right, right. That's what I'm saying. Like your consistency is flawless, right? So you've developed again, you probably have enzymatic enzyme or like the enzymes related to all of this thing. They're always on. You never have to produce more or take 2 or 3 weeks of like ramping up production of these enzymes because your consistency has been, I always do this, right? So your body has already adapted to, hey, we always have the enzymes on board to execute flawlessly and efficiently on these things. Whereas somebody else, um, they're probably just barely getting started on that journey. So it'll take, 2 or 3 weeks of building up those enzymes to really capitalize on, hey, when I go outside, I really feel good. But trust me, it doesn't take, like if you're consistent, it doesn't take more than a month to like start to notice, hey, my body really does respond really well when I just spend 10, 15, 20 minutes outside. After a training session, right? Or even during a training session, right? If it's the appropriate time of the year, and gyms, that can open their garage doors and stuff like that. Those are the types of gyms I like to train at. I do not like to go to like a indoor enclosed gym with lots of LED lighting. Like if I rarely, do that anyway when I travel. I don't go to those types of gyms anyway. But if I do, I choose not to do that, right? And if that's the only option, I will spend some time outside before and after that gym session for exactly the reasons that you said. I know that that's going to be an extra stressful environment and I'm going to stress my body intentionally. So I wanted to make sure that I optimize the recovery side before or after or both, right? And so those are very key takeaways of like how most people function. Most people train really early, execute on that, but then fail to execute on the recovery side of setting their body up to recover appropriately.
Yeah. We see that a lot. And my favorite hack is to drive to the gym, park up, and then walk around the block and then walk inside, which
Yeah,
you will hardly see. And people used to look at me like, "Oh, why you're doing weird things?" And I'm like, "Yeah, all the things you said I was doing weird for last 10 years, you are all copying now."
right.
Because
Yeah,
you want to
well,
be
and
free as well, and you want to have a stress-free environment. Following up on all this, what I wanted to kind of touch up on, like environment side, to me, gut health is environment as well. So
yes,
based in on all this you said, mental preparation, air quality, light quality, any kind of maybe ergogenic adjustments for setting up your office so you can actually get up and move, go into your bathroom in the furthest area and whatnot. Can there be something done to improve our gut health for somebody who you just described? Wakes up really early before sunrises, goes to gym, works out, goes straight into office and never sees daylight. Can they do something to make sure that those kind of habits do not interfere with their ability to digest food, which I personally see a lot, that they just
yeah. So there are two things that we got to figure it out, right? Is the digestion being happening solely because of the lifestyle that you just described? If it's that case, then it's as simple as you just need to add some actual intentional infrared and UV light, whether that's through the sun or a panel like this with UV light intentionally at your stomach area. We've talked about this with our digestive series, and I think we have 3 or 4 episodes on that where we actively talk about there needs to be light that interacts with the digestive tract that then coordinates with the eyes and the brain to tell yourself what needs to happen. If that's the case, then some of that coupled with making sure that your diet is seasonal, right? Wintertime, a little bit less carbohydrates, summertime, a little bit more, etc. That usually resolves it for that. Now, there's a second component here. If there are large amounts of electromagnetic fields going on with your home or the environment you spend a lot of time in, there might be things that you have to do that like you can't add things in to fix that problem. You have to take things out. For example, maybe ensuring that your bedroom is completely EMF safe, right? Or in that, again, depending on your situation, maybe your whole home, you need to move a home, right? That might happen, right? Like digestive problems are a key indicator to me that electromagnetic fields are interfering with your brain and your gut axis. That's what that means to me, right? And so what are the electromagnetic fields that could be happening? The lifestyle you just described is one of them, severe lack of infrared and UV light. If that's the case, it's a simple solve. You get a panel, you do some tanning sessions, with you can do it, synthetically in the wintertime and stuff like that. And you change your eating habit just a little bit to be a little bit more seasonal. That tends to work really well if that's really what's causing the problem. That's actually probably 60% of the time. The other 40% of the time, people that are living in cities, especially big metropolitan cities with lots of 5G signaling networks and stuff like that. That has more to do with, let's test your home. Let's make sure that you're not having an environmental problem, just like an environmental toxin. But in this case, it's EMFs, right? And are there things you can do about that? Yes, but that is unique to your case, right? Are you living in a high rise? Are you living in an apartment? Are you living in a home? Those are the details that you need to know in order to know exactly what you to do there. It starts with getting a test. Get your what's the a building biologist to come in and test your environment. If I would start with the changes that I just said. Hey, add in some infrared, some UV, change your diet a little bit. Don't sleep with your cell phone next to your head. Try not to have laptops on your lap, that sort of stuff. Do that for a few weeks. If things don't resolve themselves, that's when I would say, let's call up somebody to test your environment, right? Now, if it
Yeah,
starts to
because not,
resolve,
not, not everyone is sensitive to that as well, like.
no, it's not. That's what I'm saying. It really depends on your melanin storage, right? If you have a lot, like something that I've noticed with myself, I became very electrosensitive when I was living next to a cell phone tower. That's because I was pale. I was depleting melanin at an exaggerated rate by living there. I couldn't, when I left there, even if I got close to an electromagnetic field, I could tell, I could feel that I wasn't going to feel well if I stayed there for very long. At this point in my, now, a year and a half later, I've taken the time to remelanate myself. I have a lot of melanin stored up. I don't really notice I don't notice it much anymore. But that's because I took the time to amplify the thing that's protecting me, which is melanin sheets in my brain and in my tissues. And so I don't get much of a disruption much more. So there's varying degrees of how sensitive you'll be to this.
Awesome. There is a lot to unpack, but I'm mindful of your time, and I'm going to let you off and see you in next video.
Awesome. Thank you very much.